The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in late September of 1882, and Lucas Dalton knew, before he even opened it, that his life was about to change forever. He stood on the porch of his ranch house outside Hamilton, Montana, holding the envelope in his weathered hands while the autumn wind swept across the grasslands that stretched toward the distant mountains. The ranch had been in his family for 15 years, carved out of wilderness through blood and determination, and it was thriving now with cattle and horses dotting the landscape. But it was lonely. So terribly lonely that some mornings Lucas woke to the silence and wondered if he might go mad from it. That was why he had placed the advertisement 6 weeks ago in the matrimonial newspaper. A practical decision, he told himself. He needed a wife, someone to share the burden and the beauty of this land. He had not expected much in response. At 32, he was no prize catch, just a hard-working rancher with calloused hands and a face weathered by sun and wind. But someone had answered. Lucas broke the seal and unfolded the letter carefully. The handwriting was neat and careful, the words chosen with obvious thought. Dear Mr. Dalton, my name is Jane Rivers, and I am writing in response to your advertisement seeking a bride. I must be honest with you from the start, as deception would serve neither of us well. I am 24 years old, able to read and write, and capable of the hard work that ranch life demands. I can cook, tend animals and keep accounts. But there is something you must know before we proceed further. My father was Samuel Rivers. Perhaps that name means nothing to you, but 5 years ago he was hanged in Wyoming Territory for robbery and murder. He was guilty of those crimes and he died for them. I understand if this knowledge makes you withdraw your offer. The sins of fathers often fall upon their children, fairly or not. But if you can see past this shadow over my name, I promise you loyalty, hard work, and honesty in all things. I have saved enough for passage to Montana and await your reply. Respectfully, Jane Rivers. Lucas read the letter 3 times, standing motionless on his porch while his foreman, Charlie, called out questions about moving the cattle to the southern pasture. He barely heard the man. His mind was turning over the words, the careful honesty of them, the vulnerability beneath the formal language. Samuel Rivers. The name stirred a vague memory. There had been newspaper accounts years ago about a gang of thieves working the railroad lines in Wyoming. Violent men who had killed a clerk during one of their robberies. Lucas had been more concerned with building his ranch at the time, but he remembered enough. The law had caught them eventually, and they had been executed for their crimes. And this woman, Jane, was one of those criminals' daughter. Lucas folded the letter and slipped it into his shirt pocket, right over his heart. Then he walked to his study and sat down at his desk to write a reply. His hand was steady as he dipped the pen in ink. Miss Rivers, your honesty does you credit. I will not pretend that your father's crimes do not give me pause, but they were his crimes, not yours. A person should be judged by their own character and actions, not by the accidents of their birth. If you are willing to come to Hamilton, Montana, and make a life here, I am willing to meet you and see if we might suit each other. I enclose funds for your journey. The train will bring you to Hamilton by the middle of October. I will meet you at the station. I hope we can build something good together. Yours truly, Lucas Dalton. He sent the letter that same afternoon and spent the next 3 weeks in a state of restless anticipation that bewildered his ranch hands. Lucas had always been calm and measured, but now he found himself riding out to check the same fence lines twice, reorganizing the barn, and even attempting to make the ranch house more presentable, which mainly involved a lot of frustrated scrubbing and rearranging of furniture. You are making yourself crazy, boss, Charlie observed one evening as they sat on the porch after dinner. Charlie was a grizzled man in his 50s who had worked for Lucas since the beginning. "She is just a woman. She is going to be my wife," Lucas said quietly, "if things work out." And if they do not, Lucas was silent for a long moment, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. "Then I will have to accept that. But I hope they do, Charlie. I really hope they do." The day Jane was scheduled to arrive dawned clear and cold. Lucas rose before sunrise, washed thoroughly, and put on his best clothes, a dark suit that he wore maybe twice a year for church or business in town. He shaved carefully, nicking himself twice in his nervousness, then saddled his horse and rode into Hamilton well before the train was due. The town was growing steadily, with new buildings going up along Main Street and more families settling in the area every month. Lucas waited at the small train station, pacing the wooden platform while the station master watched him with barely concealed amusement. "Waiting on someone special, Mr. Dalton. My bride is arriving," Lucas said, then immediately felt foolish. "Well, potentially my bride. We have been corresponding." "A mail-order bride," the station master said, nodding sagely. "Many men are doing that now, nothing to be ashamed of. My cousin married a woman from Pennsylvania that way, and they have been happy together for 5 years now." Lucas nodded, but he was barely listening. All his attention was fixed on the railway line stretching east toward the horizon. When he finally heard the distant whistle of the approaching train, his heart began to hammer in his chest. The locomotive pulled into the station with a great hiss of steam and squeal of brakes. Passengers began to disembark, a handful of men in business suits, a family with 3 small children, an elderly couple. And then, finally, a young woman in a dark blue traveling dress stepped down onto the platform, carrying a single worn carpetbag. She was not beautiful in the conventional sense. Her face was too angular, her features too strong. But there was something striking about her, something that made Lucas unable to look away. She had dark auburn hair pulled back in a simple bun, and her eyes, as they scanned the platform nervously, were a startling green. She was slender but moved with a kind of quiet strength that suggested she was exactly as capable as her letter had claimed. Lucas stepped forward, his heart still racing. "Miss Rivers," her gaze snapped to him, and for a moment they simply looked at each other. Then she nodded. "Mr. Dalton. Thank you for coming to meet me." "Of course." He reached for her bag. "May I?" She hesitated, then handed it to him. Her fingers brushed his briefly, and he felt a spark of something he could not quite name. "You are very kind." They walked to where his horse was tied, and Lucas realized he had made a tactical error. He had only brought one mount, assuming they could ride together, but now that seemed far too intimate for a first meeting. "I apologize. I should have brought the wagon. Would you be comfortable riding with me, or should I rent something in town?" Jane looked at the horse, then at him. "I can ride. I grew up around horses." Lucas helped her mount, then swung up behind her. She was rigid in front of him, clearly uncomfortable with the closeness, and he tried to keep as much distance between them as possible while still maintaining control of the horse. They rode out of town in awkward silence. The ranch was about 5 miles from Hamilton, and the journey gave Lucas time to notice small details about the woman in front of him. She sat straight in the saddle despite her obvious discomfort. Her dress, though clean and neatly mended, had been repaired many times. Her hands, when he glimpsed them, bore calluses that spoke of hard work. Everything about her confirmed what her letter had suggested. She was a woman who had known struggle and survived it. "It is beautiful here," Jane said suddenly, breaking the silence. "I have never seen mountains like this before." "Where are you coming from?" Lucas asked. "Nebraska. I have been working for a family there as a housekeeper and cook." She paused. "They were kind to me, but when I told them I was leaving to come here, they seemed relieved." I think they were always a little afraid of me, knowing about my father. That must have been difficult. It was lonely, Jane said quietly. Always wondering if people knew if they were judging me. Starting over somewhere new seemed like the only real solution. They crested a rise, and Lucas's ranch spread out before them. The main house was a solid two-story structure built from logs and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around three sides. Behind it stood the barn, the bunkhouse for the hands, several outbuildings and corrals where horses moved lazily in the afternoon sun. Cattle dotted the grasslands that rolled away in all directions. "This is yours?" Jane asked, and Lucas heard the surprise in her voice. "Mine and the bank's," he said with a slight smile. "But I have been making good progress on the mortgage. Another few years and it will be entirely mine." He helped her down from the horse, and this time when their hands touched, she did not pull away quite so quickly. "I will show you the house," Lucas said. "You can have the main bedroom upstairs. I will move my things into the spare room." "That does not seem fair," Jane protested. "I should take the spare room. The main bedroom is larger and has better light. Please, I insist." She studied him for a moment, those green eyes searching his face as if trying to read his intentions. Then she nodded. "Thank you." Lucas showed her through the house, suddenly seeing it through her eyes and finding it wanting. The furniture was plain and masculine, the floors needed a good scrubbing, and there was a general air of neglect that came from a man living alone with little concern for domestic comfort. But Jane did not comment on any of that. She simply observed everything carefully, her expression thoughtful. "It has good bones," she said finally. "With some work it could be very comfortable." "You are being kind," Lucas said. "I know it needs a woman's touch." "It needs care," Jane corrected. "Man or woman, a house responds to attention." He left her to settle into the bedroom and went to start dinner, feeling thoroughly out of his depth. Lucas could cook basic ranch food, beans and bread and tough beef, but nothing that seemed appropriate for this occasion. In the end, he did his best and called her down when everything was ready. They ate in uncomfortable silence for several minutes before Jane spoke. "We should discuss the practical matters, I think. The terms of this arrangement." "All right," Lucas agreed, though the word arrangement struck him as painfully unromantic. "You wrote that you wanted to see if we might suit each other," Jane said, meeting his eyes directly. "What did you mean by that? Are you proposing a trial period before we marry?" Lucas set down his fork. "I thought we might take some time to get to know each other. I do not expect you to commit to marriage with a stranger. If after a few weeks or months we decide we cannot make a life together, I will provide you with funds to go wherever you choose. No obligations." Something shifted in Jane's expression, a softening around her eyes. "That is more generous than I expected." "I want a partner," Lucas said, "not an indentured servant. This only works if we both choose it freely." "Then I will be honest with you," Jane said. "I chose to come here because I am tired of hiding, tired of being ashamed of something I did not do. When you wrote that my father's crimes were not mine, it was the first time anyone had said something like that to me. It gave me hope that maybe I could have a real life, not just existence in the shadows." "You can," Lucas said firmly. "Here you are just Jane, not anyone's daughter. Just yourself." Her eyes glistened suddenly, and she looked down at her plate. "I hope you mean that." "I do." The first week passed in a flurry of activity and careful navigation of boundaries. Jane rose before dawn and threw herself into improving the house with an energy that amazed Lucas. She cleaned and organized, rearranged furniture to make better use of space, and began making curtains from fabric she found stored in a trunk. She also took over the cooking, and Lucas discovered that meals could be something more than mere fuel. For his part, Lucas tried to give her space while also including her in the daily operations of the ranch. He showed her around the property, introduced her to the hands, and explained how everything worked. Jane listened attentively and asked intelligent questions that showed she understood the complexities of ranching. Charlie was suspicious at first, watching Jane with narrowed eyes whenever she was near. But that changed one morning when a horse in the corral got tangled in loose wire and panicked. Before Lucas could reach the animal, Jane had climbed the fence and was approaching the frightened horse, speaking in a low, calm voice. She freed the wire with steady hands while the horse trembled but did not bolt, responding to her quiet confidence. "She knows her way around animals," Charlie admitted to Lucas afterward. "Maybe she will work out after all." But the real test came on a Saturday afternoon 2 weeks after Jane's arrival, when Lucas and Jane rode into Hamilton for supplies. They were loading sacks of flour and oats into the back of the wagon when a man approached them on the street. He was well dressed, with the look of a successful merchant, and his expression was troubled. "Excuse me," he said. "Are you Lucas Dalton?" "I am," Lucas confirmed. The man's gaze shifted to Jane and his face went pale. "And is this Jane Rivers?" Lucas felt Jane stiffen beside him. "It is," she said quietly. "Do I know you, sir? My name is Robert Morrison. I owned a store in Laramie, Wyoming Territory 5 years ago." His voice was shaking now. "Your father and his gang robbed me. They killed my clerk, a boy of 19. His name was David, and he was going to be married." The silence that followed was crushing. People on the street had stopped to stare, sensing drama. Lucas saw Jane's face go white, but she did not look away from Morrison. "I know," she said. "I know what my father did. I am sorry, Mr. Morrison, sorrier than any words can express. David's death was a terrible, senseless tragedy." "An apology does not bring him back," Morrison said, his voice breaking. "Every day I remember finding him bleeding out on the floor of my store. Your father did that." "Yes, he did." Jane's voice was steady despite the tears running down her face. "And he was hanged for it, as he deserved." "But I was 17 years old when that happened, Mr. Morrison. I had no part in his crimes. I did not even know what he was doing until the law came for him." "You carry his blood," Morrison said. "How can you live with that?" Lucas stepped forward, placing himself partly between Jane and Morrison. "That is enough. She has apologized for something she did not do. What more do you want from her?" "I want my clerk back," Morrison said bitterly. "But I cannot have that, can I?" He turned and walked away, his shoulders shaking. The crowd dispersed slowly and Lucas guided Jane back to the wagon. She climbed up mechanically, her face still pale, and they rode out of town in silence. Halfway back to the ranch, Lucas pulled the wagon to a stop. "Are you all right?" he asked. "No," Jane said honestly, "but I will be. That was not the first time someone has confronted me about my father's crimes, and it probably will not be the last." "It is not fair," Lucas said fiercely. "You did nothing wrong." "Life is not fair," Jane said, turning to look at him with those devastating green eyes. "But you knew that already." "I do, but that does not make it right." Lucas reached out and took her hand, surprising himself with the gesture. "Your father's sins are not yours to carry, Jane. I meant that when I wrote it, and I mean it now. People like Mr. Morrison will always see me as the daughter of a killer." "Then they are fools," Lucas said. "I see you as a brave woman who has survived terrible circumstances and is trying to build a new life. That takes courage." Jane's fingers tightened around his. "You really believe that?" "I do." She was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the rolling grasslands. Then she said very softly, "I think I could fall in love with you, Lucas Dalton." His heart stuttered in his chest. "I think I could fall in love with you too, Jane Rivers." They did not kiss, not yet. That moment was too raw, too vulnerable for physical intimacy. But they held hands all the way back to the ranch, and that felt like enough. The incident in town had consequences. Over the next few days, Lucas noticed a change in how some people treated him. Two business owners in Hamilton became noticeably cooler when he came in to conduct transactions. Someone left a newspaper clipping about Samuel Rivers's execution on his doorstep, clearly intended as a message. And one evening, as Lucas was checking on the cattle in the southern pasture, he found 3 young men blocking his path. "That is far enough, Dalton," said the one in the middle, a brawny kid named Jack Turner, whose father owned the neighboring ranch. Lucas reined in his horse. "What is this about, Jack?" "It is about you bringing a criminal into our community," Jack said. "My father says you are being a fool, harboring the daughter of a murderer. He says it reflects badly on all of us." "Your father is entitled to his opinion," Lucas said calmly. "But Jane Rivers has committed no crime. She has as much right to be here as anyone." "That is where you are wrong," said one of the other boys. "Decent folk do not want her kind around. You should send her away." "And if I do not?" Jack's hand moved to the rifle at his saddle. "Then you are choosing to side with criminals over your neighbors. That is not a smart choice." Lucas felt anger rise in his chest, but he kept his voice level. "Go home, boys, before you do something you will regret." "We are not afraid of you," Jack said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "You should be," said Charlie's voice from behind them. Lucas's foreman emerged from the trees, his own rifle held casually but ready. "And you should be thinking about how your fathers will react when they hear you threatened Mr. Dalton on his own land. That is a serious matter." The boys looked at each other, suddenly less confident. Then Jack turned his horse. "This is not over," he said, but it sounded like bravado rather than a real threat. They rode off and Charlie came up beside Lucas. "Trouble is brewing, boss." "I know," Lucas said, "but I will not send Jane away because of other people's prejudice." "Did not think you would," Charlie said. "Just wanted you to know that the hands and we are with you on this. She is a good woman. Anyone with eyes can see that. If you need us to stand with you, we will." Lucas felt a swell of gratitude. "Thank you, Charlie. That means more than you know." When he returned to the ranch house that evening, he found Jane in the kitchen, preparing dinner. She looked up as he entered, and her expression told him she knew something had happened. "There was trouble," she said. "It was not a question." Lucas nodded. "Some boys from a neighboring ranch tried to intimidate me about you being here. It came to nothing." Jane set down the knife she had been using to chop vegetables. "Lucas, if my presence here is going to cause you real problems, I should leave. I do not want to be the reason you lose your standing in the community." "No," Lucas said firmly. He crossed the kitchen and took her hands in his. "Jane, I have thought about this a great deal over the past few weeks. I have watched you work, listened to you talk, seen how you treat people and animals. You are kind and honest and strong. You make this house feel like a home. You make me want to be a better man. I will not give that up because some people are too narrow-minded to see past your father's crimes." "You could lose business," Jane said. "You could lose friends." "Then they were not real friends to begin with." Lucas took a deep breath. "I am saying this badly, but what I mean is, Jane, I do not want a trial period anymore. I want you to marry me. Not because of the original arrangement, but because I am falling in love with you. Have been falling in love with you since the day you arrived." Jane's eyes went wide. "Lucas, if you do not feel the same way, I understand," he continued quickly. "And the offer still stands. You can stay here as long as you want, no obligations, but I needed you to know how I feel." "Stop talking," Jane said, and then she kissed him. It was not a practiced kiss, not smooth or perfect. It was desperate and heartfelt, the kiss of two people who had been alone for too long and had finally found each other. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I love you," Jane said. "I have been trying not to, trying to protect myself in case this did not work out, but I do." "I love you, Lucas." "Then marry me," he said, "please." "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony at the church in Hamilton. The minister, an older man named Reverend Thompson who had known Lucas for years, performed the service without hesitation. Charlie stood as Lucas's witness, and Jane had asked the woman who ran the general store, Mrs. Patterson, who had been kind to her despite everything. Not everyone in town approved. The church was half empty, with several prominent families conspicuously absent. But Lucas did not care. All that mattered was Jane, standing beside him in a simple white dress she had sewn herself, promising to love and honor him for the rest of her life. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas kissed Jane with all the tenderness and passion he felt, and the small congregation applauded. It was not the grand wedding some might have dreamed of, but it was real and honest, just like their love. The first months of their marriage were not easy. The social ostracism continued, with some families refusing to do business with Lucas and others making pointed comments whenever they saw Jane in town. There were nights when Jane cried in Lucas's arms, frustrated and hurt by the constant judgment. But there were also moments of pure joy, quiet evenings on the porch watching the sunset, mornings waking up tangled together in bed. The simple pleasure of building a life with someone who truly understood you. Jane transformed the ranch in ways Lucas had not anticipated. She started a vegetable garden that flourished under her care, providing fresh food throughout the growing season. She befriended the ranch hands, learning their stories and treating small injuries and illnesses with remedies her mother had taught her. She worked alongside Lucas during the spring branding, proving herself as capable as any of the men and earning their respect in the process. And slowly, gradually, the attitude in Hamilton began to shift. It started with small things. Mrs. Patterson invited Jane to join the women's quilting circle that met every Tuesday. The invitation came with a note that said simply, "You have proven yourself to be a woman of character. That is all that matters." Jane attended, nervous but determined, and found that most of the women were welcoming once they gave her a chance. Then there was the incident with the Hendersons' barn. The family lived about 10 miles from Lucas's ranch, and their barn caught fire one dry summer evening. Lucas and his hands rode over immediately to help fight the blaze, and Jane went with them. She worked for hours, hauling water and helping to rescue animals, her dress soaked with sweat and streaked with soot. When the fire was finally out and the exhausted families gathered to assess the damage, Mr. Henderson approached Jane. "Thank you," he said simply. "You saved 2 of our horses tonight. I am grateful." Jane nodded, too tired to say much. But the next Sunday at church, the Henderson family sat in the pew behind Lucas and Jane, a public statement of support that did not go unnoticed. The real turning point came in early December when Robert Morrison, the man who had confronted Jane on the street months earlier, appeared at their ranch. Lucas was in the barn when Charlie came to get him. "That Morrison fellow is here," Charlie said. "Wants to talk to you and Mrs. Dalton." Lucas found Jane in the kitchen, and they walked out to the porch together. Morrison stood in the yard, holding his hat in his hands, looking older and more tired than Lucas remembered. "Mr. Morrison," Lucas said carefully, "what can we do for you?" "I came to apologize," Morrison said, looking at Jane. "To you, Mrs. Dalton, for what I said to you in town." Jane was very still beside Lucas. "I do not understand." "I have been carrying anger for 5 years," Morrison said. Anger at your father, at the men who rode with him, at God for letting such things happen. When I saw you, I wanted someone to blame, someone to punish. But you were just a convenient target. You did not kill David. You did not rob my store. And I had no right to make you pay for your father's crimes. What changed your mind? Jane asked quietly. I have been watching you, Morrison admitted. Watching how you live, how you treat people. I saw what you did at the Henderson fire. I talked to people who know you. And I realized that judging you by your father's actions is no different than the vigilantes who wanted to hang those men without a trial. It is injustice, plain and simple. He took a deep breath. I do not know if you can forgive me, but I wanted you to know that I was wrong. You are not your father. You are your own person, and from what I can see, you are a good person. Tears were streaming down Jane's face. Thank you, she whispered. You do not know what it means to hear that. Morrison nodded, put his hat back on, and turned to leave, but Jane called out to him. Mr. Morrison, wait. She wiped her eyes. David, your clerk, what was he like? Morrison turned back, surprised. He was a good boy, kind, hard-working. He loved to read and was always talking about the books he had borrowed from the library. His fiancée was a schoolteacher. They were planning to marry in the spring. I wish I could have known him, Jane said. I wish my father had never done what he did. I wish I could change the past. But since I cannot, the only thing I can do is try to live a life that honors the innocent people he hurt. To be the kind of person who makes the world better, not worse. Morrison's eyes were wet now, too. I think you are doing that, Mrs. Dalton. I truly do. He paused. David would have liked you, I think. He was always one to judge people by their character, not their circumstances. After Morrison left, Lucas held Jane while she cried, releasing years of pent-up guilt and shame. It is all right, he murmured. Let it out. Let it all out. I have been carrying so much, Jane said between sobs. So much guilt, even though I knew intellectually that I did nothing wrong. But knowing something and feeling it are different things. I know, Lucas said, but you can let it go now. You do not have to carry it anymore. That conversation with Morrison seemed to break something open in the community. Word spread about his apology, and people began to reassess their attitudes toward Jane. It helped that she had proven herself through months of hard work and quiet dignity, never complaining or fighting back against the prejudice, just living her life with grace and integrity. By the spring of 1884, Jane was largely accepted in Hamilton. She had friends among the women in town, and the Dalton ranch was thriving under the combined efforts of Lucas and Jane. They had expanded the herd, improved the breeding stock, and were turning a healthy profit that allowed them to pay down the mortgage faster than Lucas had dared hope. But the greatest joy came in June of that year, when Jane discovered she was pregnant. Are you sure? Lucas asked, his face alight with wonder as they sat together in their bedroom. The doctor confirmed it this morning, Jane said, laughing at his expression. We are going to have a baby, Lucas. In December, he thinks. Lucas pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she might break. I love you so much, he said. I cannot believe how lucky I am. I am the lucky one, Jane countered. You gave me a life when I thought I would never have one. You loved me when the world wanted me to carry shame forever. You are the best man I have ever known. Then we are both lucky, Lucas decided, and kissed her tenderly. The pregnancy was not easy. Jane suffered from severe morning sickness for the first 3 months, and Lucas fretted over her constantly, trying to make sure she rested and ate properly. But Jane, stubborn as ever, refused to be coddled. I am pregnant, not ill, she told him one morning when he tried to stop her from working in the garden. Women have been doing this for thousands of years, Lucas. I will be fine. I just want to take care of you, he protested. You do take care of me, Jane said, softening. every single day. But I also need to do things to feel useful. I will rest when I need to, I promise. They compromised, with Jane agreeing to reduce her workload and Lucas agreeing to stop hovering quite so much. The pregnancy progressed well, and as Jane's belly grew round with their child, Lucas found himself overwhelmed with love for this woman who had come into his life so unexpectedly. The baby arrived on a snowy December morning, 2 days before Christmas. Lucas paced the downstairs of their house while the doctor and Mrs. Patterson attended to Jane upstairs. The hours seemed to stretch forever, punctuated by sounds from above that made Lucas's heart race with fear and helplessness. Finally, just as dawn was breaking, he heard the thin, angry cry of a newborn. Lucas took the stairs 2 at a time, bursting into the bedroom to find Jane exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a white blanket. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Lucas approached slowly, almost reverently. Jane pulled back the blanket to reveal a small red face, eyes squeezed shut, mouth open in a wail of protest at being thrust into the cold world. "He was perfect. A son," Lucas breathed. "We have a son." "We do," Jane said. "I thought we might name him David." Lucas looked up sharply, understanding immediately. "After Morrison's clerk," Jane nodded. "I want his name to be remembered with love, not just tragedy, and I want our son to know that we honor those who suffered because of my father's crimes. That we carry their memory forward in a good way." "David Dalton," Lucas said, testing the name. "I think it is perfect." The doctor cleared his throat. "Both mother and baby are healthy and doing well, but they need rest now. Mrs. Dalton has been through quite an ordeal." Lucas kissed Jane's forehead. "Get some sleep. I will be right outside if you need anything." But Jane was already drifting off, exhausted by the labor, their son cradled safely in her arms. David was a healthy baby with a powerful set of lungs and his mother's green eyes. Lucas had never known it was possible to love someone so instantly and completely. He found himself staring at his son for hours, marveling at the tiny fingers and toes, the way David would grip his finger with surprising strength, the small sounds he made while sleeping. Jane recovered quickly from the birth, and soon the house was filled with the rhythm of caring for an infant. Sleepless nights and endless diaper changes, the sweet smell of milk, the moment when David would stop crying and settle into one of their arms with a contented sigh. News of the baby's name spread through Hamilton, and one snowy January afternoon, Robert Morrison appeared at their door once again. Lucas invited him in, and Morrison stood awkwardly in the front room, looking at the baby sleeping in the cradle near the fire. "I heard what you named him," Morrison said finally. "I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything," Jane said gently. "We just wanted you to know that David, your David, is remembered, that his life meant something." Morrison wiped at his eyes roughly. "Thank you. That means more than you can possibly know." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I brought something. It is one of the books my David loved. I thought perhaps when your David is old enough he might enjoy it too." Jane took the package with trembling hands. "We will treasure this, and when he is old enough, we will tell him about the brave young man he was named for." Morrison nodded, unable to speak anymore. He left shortly after, but there was a peace in his face that had not been there before. The years that followed were good ones. David grew into a bright, curious child with his mother's intelligence and his father's steady temperament. The ranch continued to prosper, and Lucas was able to pay off the mortgage entirely by 1887, making the land truly theirs. They expanded their home, adding rooms for the family they hoped to continue growing. Jane gave birth to a daughter in the spring of 1888, a tiny girl with Lucas's dark hair and a smile that could light up a room. They named her Sarah, after Lucas's mother. David, now 3 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister and appointed himself her guardian, a role he took very seriously. Hamilton grew along with their family, transforming from a rough frontier town into a proper community with schools, churches, and established businesses. Jane became an integral part of that community, known for her charitable work and her willingness to help anyone in need. The whispers about her father faded into the past, replaced by respect for the woman she had become. One summer evening in 1890, Lucas and Jane sat on their porch watching David and Sarah play in the yard while the sun set behind the mountains. Jane was pregnant again, though they had not told the children yet. She leaned against Lucas's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her. "Do you ever think about how different your life would be if you had not answered my advertisement?" Lucas asked. Jane was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes, but I try not to dwell on it. The past is the past. All we have is now, and now is pretty wonderful." "It is," Lucas agreed. "Though I have to admit, I was terrified when I sent that letter. I thought maybe no one would respond, or if they did, it would be someone who only wanted my money or security." "I was terrified too," Jane said. "I almost did not send my letter. I kept thinking, why would anyone want me? The daughter of a killer, with nothing to offer but scandal and hard work." "You had everything to offer," Lucas said firmly. "Strength, honesty, courage, the willingness to work hard and build something real. You are the bravest person I know, Jane. You could have let your father's crimes define you, could have hidden in the shadows forever. Instead, you came here and built a life on your own terms. You faced down prejudice and hatred with grace and dignity. You made people see you, the real you, not just a criminal's daughter." "I could not have done it without you," Jane said. "You believed in me when I barely believed in myself. You stood up for me when it would have been easier to turn me away. You loved me, Lucas. Really loved me, not in spite of my past, but including it. Understanding that it shaped me but did not define me. Your father's sins were never yours to carry," Lucas said, echoing the words he had written so long ago. "They were his alone. You are your own person, Jane, and you have built a life that honors everything good in the world. Look at our children. Look at this ranch. Look at the friends and community we have. This is what you created, not through your father's blood, but through your own choices and actions." Jane turned to kiss him, a soft, sweet kiss that spoke of years of love and partnership. "We created this together. You and me, partners in everything. Partners," Lucas agreed. "Always." David ran up to the porch then, his face flushed with excitement. "Papa, can we go fishing tomorrow, please?" "We will see," Lucas said, ruffling his son's hair. "If your mother says it is all right and if you finish your chores." "I will, I promise." David raced back to where Sarah was picking wildflowers, eager to share the news. "He looks just like you," Jane observed. "But he has your determination," Lucas said. "That boy never gives up once he has set his mind on something." "Heaven help us when he is a teenager," Jane said, but she was smiling. The third baby was born in early 1891, another boy they named William after Jane's grandfather, one of the few members of her family she remembered with fondness. William was a calm baby, content to observe the world with serious eyes, a stark contrast to David's early intensity. With 3 children, the ranch house was constantly full of noise and activity. Lucas hired additional help to manage the expanded cattle operation, and Jane juggled motherhood with continuing to run the household and contribute to community life. It was exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. One afternoon in the spring of 1892, as Jane was hanging laundry while keeping an eye on the children playing nearby, a wagon pulled up to the house. A young woman climbed down, looking nervous and uncertain. She was perhaps 20 years old, with a worn traveling bag and clothes that had seen better days. "Can I help you?" Jane asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "I am looking for Mrs. Jane Dalton," the woman said. "I was told she lives here." "I am Jane Dalton." The woman's face flooded with relief. "My name is Margaret Foster. I am in a similar situation to the one you were in years ago. My father was a criminal, convicted and executed for his crimes. I have been trying to start over, but everywhere I go, people find out and judge me for something I did not do. Someone in Hamilton told me your story, how you came here as a mail-order bride and built a life despite everything. I was hoping maybe you could give me some advice." Jane's heart went out to this young woman who was living through the same nightmare she had endured. "Come inside. Let us talk." Over tea, Margaret told her story. Her father had been part of a gang that robbed banks and stage coaches in Colorado. He had been killed in a shootout with law enforcement 3 years ago, and Margaret had been trying to escape his legacy ever since. She had worked a series of temporary jobs, always having to move on when people discovered her identity. She was exhausted and losing hope. "I do not know what to do anymore," Margaret said, her voice breaking. "I am so tired of running, tired of being judged for crimes I did not commit, but I do not know how to make people see past my father's sins." Jane reached across the table and took the younger woman's hand. "It is not easy. I will not lie to you about that. There will always be people who cannot look past your father's actions. But there are also good people out there who understand that children should not be held accountable for their parents' mistakes." She told Margaret about her own journey, about Lucas's initial letter, and the way he had stood by her through all the difficulties. She spoke about the importance of living with integrity, of proving yourself through actions rather than words, and she offered practical help. "We need someone to help with the children and the household," Jane said. "I can offer you a position here if you would like it. You would have room and board, a fair wage, and time to figure out what you want to do with your life. And you would have a place where people know your story and do not judge you for it." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "You would do that for me, a complete stranger." "You are not a stranger," Jane said gently. "You are someone who needs help, and I remember very clearly what that feels like. Besides, I believe in paying forward the kindness that was shown to me." Margaret accepted the offer and became part of the Dalton household. She was wonderful with the children, patient and loving, and she and Jane developed a deep friendship. Lucas supported Jane's decision completely, understanding why this mattered so much to his wife. Over the following year, Margaret grew in confidence and began to believe that she might actually have a future. She started attending church with the Dalton family and gradually became part of the community. And perhaps inevitably, she caught the eye of Charlie, Lucas's longtime foreman. Charlie was 15 years older than Margaret, but he was a good man, steady and kind. He courted Margaret with old-fashioned gentleness, bringing her wildflowers and taking her on chaperoned walks around the ranch. When he finally asked her to marry him, Margaret came to Jane in tears. "I do not know if I deserve this," she said. "Charlie is such a good man, and I am still just the daughter of a criminal." "You are Margaret Foster," Jane said firmly. "A kind, hard-working, honest woman who deserves all the happiness in the world. Your father's crimes have nothing to do with who you are. Let yourself be happy. Accept this gift." Margaret and Charlie were married in the fall of 1893, with the Dalton family in attendance to celebrate. It was a joyous occasion, made more meaningful by the knowledge that Margaret had found acceptance and love despite her difficult past. The Daltons' life continued to evolve and grow. David started school in Hamilton and proved to be an excellent student with a particular gift for mathematics. Sarah was more interested in animals and spent hours following Lucas around the ranch, learning everything she could about horses and cattle. William was still quite young but already showing signs of being the family peacemaker, always trying to help resolve disputes between his older siblings. Jane gave birth to one more child in 1894, a daughter they named Emma. With 4 children, the house was chaotic but full of love. Lucas often marveled at how different his life was from what he had imagined. He had thought he would live and die a lonely bachelor rancher. Instead, he had a vibrant, beautiful family and a wife who made every day an adventure. The ranch itself had become one of the most successful operations in the region. Lucas's reputation for fair dealing and quality livestock spread, and buyers came from as far away as Chicago to purchase his cattle and horses. The financial security this brought allowed Lucas and Jane to invest in the community, helping to fund the new school building and contributing to the church's expansion. By the late 1890s, Jane's past was rarely mentioned anymore. She was simply known as Jane Dalton, respected member of the community, loving mother, and devoted wife. The shadow of her father's crimes had finally lifted, not because people forgot, but because her own actions had shown so clearly that she was her own person. One evening in the spring of 1899, Lucas and Jane sat on their porch after the children were in bed. 17 years had passed since that nervous morning when Lucas had met Jane at the train station. They were older now, with gray beginning to thread through their hair and lines etched into their faces by years of sun and wind and laughter. But the love between them had only deepened with time. "You remember what you said to me that day we rode into town and met Mr. Morrison?" Jane asked. "I said many things that day," Lucas replied. "You said my father's sins were not mine to carry," Jane said. "And you were right. But it took me a long time to really believe it, to internalize it in a way that let me be free." "When did you finally believe it?" Lucas asked curiously. Jane thought for a moment. "I think it was when David was born. Holding him, looking at his perfect little face, I realized that he was just himself. Not me, not you, but his own person who would make his own choices and live his own life. And I understood that it was the same for me. I was not my father. I was just Jane, making my own choices, living my own life." "You have lived a remarkable life," Lucas said. "You have overcome so much and built something beautiful." "We have built something beautiful," Jane corrected. "I could not have done any of this without you. You gave me the chance to be myself, free from the weight of the past. You loved me when I could barely love myself. You are my hero, Lucas Dalton." "And you are mine," Lucas said, pulling her close. "You are the bravest, strongest, most amazing woman I have ever known. I thank God every day that you answered my advertisement." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the house, one of the children cried out briefly before settling back into sleep. A coyote called in the distance, and the night breeze brought the scent of grass and wildflowers. "You ever wonder what David would have thought?" Jane asked softly. "Morrison's clerk, I mean. Do you think he would approve of us naming our son after him?" "I think he would be honored," Lucas said. "And I think he would be proud of what you have made of your life. You took something terrible and found a way to make meaning from it, to honor the victims rather than perpetuate the cycle of violence and pain." "I hope so," Jane said. "I hope our David grows up to be someone who makes the world better, someone who helps rather than hurts." "He will," Lucas said confidently. "He has you as his mother. How could he be anything but a good man?" The years continued to pass in a steady rhythm of work and family, challenges and triumphs. David grew into a young man of integrity and intelligence, eventually going off to study law with plans to return to Montana and help ensure justice was fairly administered. Sarah became an accomplished horsewoman and took over much of the ranch's breeding program, developing a line of horses known throughout the region for their quality and temperament. William showed an aptitude for business and helped Lucas expand their operations into new ventures. Emma, the youngest, was still finding her way but showed promise as a teacher, spending hours helping younger children learn to read and write. Charlie and Margaret had 3 children of their own and remained on the ranch, with Charlie eventually taking over as full manager when Lucas decided to step back from daily operations. The relationship between the two families was close, with the children growing up together like cousins. In 1905, when Lucas was 55 and Jane 47, they celebrated their 21st wedding anniversary with a large gathering at the ranch. Friends and family came from all over Montana, filling the house and yard with laughter and love. Robert Morrison was there, now elderly but still sharp-minded, and he made a toast that brought tears to many eyes. "I have known the Daltons for over 20 years now," he said, his voice carrying across the crowded yard. "And I can say without hesitation that they represent the very best of what people can be." Jane came to this community bearing the burden of her father's terrible crimes. She could have let that burden crush her, could have become bitter or hopeless. Instead, she chose to live with courage and grace, to prove through her actions that we are not defined by our parents' failures. And Lucas had the wisdom and the heart to see her for who she truly was, not as the daughter of a criminal, but as a woman of character. Together, they have built a family and a life that honors everything good in the world. They have shown all of us that redemption is possible, that love can overcome prejudice, and that a person's true worth is measured by their own choices and actions. To Lucas and Jane Dalton, may they have many more years of happiness together. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Jane, standing beside Lucas with tears streaming down her face, looked around at all the people who had become their community, their family. These were people who knew her story, knew where she had come from, and loved her anyway. It was more than she had ever dreamed possible on that desperate day when she had answered Lucas's advertisement. That night, after the guests had left and the house was finally quiet, Lucas and Jane lay in bed together, exhausted but happy. "Thank you," Jane said softly into the darkness. "For what?" Lucas asked, already half asleep. "For everything. For seeing me when I felt invisible. For loving me when I thought I was unlovable. For giving me a life when I thought I would never have one. For our children, our home, our family. For 21 years of being the best partner I could have asked for." Lucas pulled her closer. "You do not need to thank me. Marrying you was the best decision I ever made. You have made my life richer and fuller than I could have imagined. I love you, Jane. I will always love you." "I love you too," Jane whispered. "Always." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, two people who had found each other against unlikely odds and built something lasting and true. The final years of their lives were peaceful ones. They watched their children grow into accomplished adults, saw grandchildren arrive to fill the ranch house with a new generation's laughter. The ranch continued to prosper under William's management, with Sarah's breeding program bringing recognition from across the country and David's legal work helping to improve justice in Montana territory. Jane remained active in the community well into her 60s, known for her charity work and her willingness to help anyone in need. She never turned away someone seeking a second chance, always remembering her own desperate need for acceptance all those years ago. The Dalton Ranch became known as a place where people could find refuge and opportunity, regardless of their past. Lucas and Jane grew old together gracefully, their love deepening with each passing year. They took pride in what they had built, not just the ranch and the family, but the example they had set. Their story became something of a legend in Hamilton, a tale told to new generations about the power of forgiveness, the importance of judging people by their own merits, and the transformative nature of love. On a warm summer evening in 1915, Lucas and Jane sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. They were both in their mid-60s now, slowed by age but still sharp and vital. Their children were all settled in their own lives, though the family remained close, gathering often for dinners and celebrations. "It has been a good life," Lucas said, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink. "It has," Jane agreed, her hand in his. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." "Do you have any regrets?" Jane considered the question carefully. "I regret the pain my father caused to innocent people. I wish David, Morrison's clerk, had lived to marry his sweetheart and have a family. I wish the world was kinder to people who are just trying to start over. But as for my own choices, my own life, no regrets at all, nor I," Lucas said. "Though I do wish I had placed that advertisement sooner so we could have had even more years together," Jane laughed. "Greedy man." "When it comes to time with you, absolutely." They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching the day fade into night. The ranch stretched out before them, a testament to decades of hard work and love. In the house behind them, they could hear their grandchildren playing, visiting for the summer. The sound filled Jane's heart with joy. "You were right, you know," she said suddenly. "About what?" "That day you wrote to me, you said my father's sins were not mine to carry. You said I should be judged by my own character and actions, not by the accidents of my birth. You were right. I spent so many years carrying guilt and shame for things I did not do. Coming here, meeting you, building this life, it let me finally put that burden down. You freed me, Lucas." "You freed yourself," Lucas said gently. "I just gave you a place where you could do it. But the courage, the strength to overcome all that prejudice and build a new life, that was all you." "We freed each other then," Jane decided. "You from loneliness, me from shame. We saved each other." "Yes," Lucas agreed. "Yes, we did." The stars emerged one by one as darkness fell, the same stars that had watched over them through all the years of their marriage. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys, as every day did. But tonight was perfect, sitting here with the person who mattered most, surrounded by the life they had built together. Jane leaned her head on Lucas's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. They had faced so much together, overcome obstacles that would have defeated lesser people. And through it all, their love had remained constant, a foundation on which everything else was built. "I would do it all again," Jane said. "Every difficult moment, every challenge. I would do it all again to end up here with you." "So would I," Lucas said, kissing the top of her head. "So would I, my love." And there, on the porch of their ranch house in Montana, surrounded by the land they loved and the family they had created, Lucas and Jane Dalton held each other and watched the night sky. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and built a love story that would echo through generations. Their legacy was not just the successful ranch, or the children and grandchildren who bore their name. It was the example they set, the proof that redemption was possible, that love could overcome prejudice, and that a person's worth was determined by their own choices and character, not by the sins or virtues of their parents. They showed an entire community that compassion and understanding could triumph over judgment and fear. The mail-order bride who arrived in Hamilton carrying the shame of her father's crimes had become a beloved pillar of the community. The lonely rancher who took a chance on love had found a partner beyond his wildest dreams. Together, they had built something beautiful and lasting, something that would continue long after they were gone. As the years went on and eventually, Lucas and Jane passed peacefully in their old age, their story lived on. David Dalton, named for a murdered clerk, became a judge known for his fairness and compassion. Sarah's horses were sought after throughout the West. William expanded the family business while never losing sight of the values his parents had instilled. Emma taught generations of children, emphasizing that every person deserved to be judged on their own merits. And in Hamilton, Montana, when people spoke of the Daltons, they spoke with respect and affection. The story of how Lucas and Jane met, how he had seen past her father's crimes to the woman she truly was, became a cherished piece of local history. It reminded people to look beyond surface judgments, to give others second chances, and to believe in the transformative power of love. The ranch itself remained in the family for generations, each new owner adding to the legacy while maintaining the core values that Lucas and Jane had established. And on the mantel in the main house, in a place of honor, sat the worn Bible that had been used at Lucas and Jane's wedding, a testament to a love that had overcome every obstacle and proved that sometimes the greatest acts of courage are not grand gestures but simple choices to see the good in another person and build a life together based on trust, respect, and unwavering love.